Welcome to Riviera Rats. Benvenuto a Riviera Rats. Thank you for my attempt at Italian. I'm Bill.
And I am Greg.
Today we are talking about the 1963 festival where the prize went to The Leopard, Il Gattopardo by Luchino Visconti, which means I want to say hi to my friend Lucy because she's been asking me about doing this movie from the second that we announced doing this podcast. I thought we were actually going to take a lot longer before we got to it, so I'm really happy to make Lucy's day. Hi, Lucy. Lucy is in Brooklyn, and this is also my way of making up for the fact that I was in Brooklyn a month ago, and I did not actually make time to see her because I'm a terrible traveler. Greg, how are you?
I'm doing okay here, Bill. Would you say you're more of a leopard lion figure, or would you say you're more of a jackal hyena?
Well, Greg, as you know, I have natural leadership qualities, so I would say you did say that I am the Marisa Paredes of our Almodovar friend group, so I would say I'm a leopard. Yeah.
That tracks for me. Whereas
Yeah.
I'm just a salt of the earth sheep, aren't I?
Well, I mean, you do let desperate farmers bang you in the middle of the night, so
But enough about Angela's ashes.
yeah. I think this is our first time recording since Ms. Paredes passed away. Is that the case?
It is.
Because it happened during the Almodovar retrospective that you attended way more of than I did.
Yeah, that's right. To the listeners of this pod who are not from our home city, our local Cinematheque, where the Toronto Film Festival regularly takes place, put on a retrospective of Pedro Almodovar in preparation for the release of The Room Next Door in a week or two.
Mm-hmm.
And
And his 75th birthday as well.
Right, yes,
Yeah.
this too. And they procured many 35 millimeter prints, including a couple from their own collection.
Yep.
So I got to. I went to the movies 15 times in December to watch his movies, and I'm a lot nuttier for it by now. But it was a lot of Marissa on screen.
Which is a great way to spend December. And rest in peace. That's a legend gone. You know, a legendary career and an incredible actor. And yeah,
And one of the tropical birds, the great tropical birds.
absolutely. And then, of course, we are always recording in a time machine, which means that by the time this comes out, it will be long past. But we are recording this minutes after the Golden Globe Awards,
That's right.
where a Cannes selection, was it more than one Cannes selection that won?
Yeah, that's right. We had a big sweep from Emilia Perez.
Oh, that's right. Of course. Yeah. Which is not a movie I love, but we'll talk
No.
about that another day. And of course, Demi Moore won for The Substance. This is basically her first time winning an acting award that didn't have the word worst in the category name.
Or People's Choice.
Right. Yeah. I'm sure she won Best Kiss at the Blockbuster Entertainment Awards in the 90s. And I'm sure it decorated her mantle with glory for a long time. But this is her winning her first Golden Globe. Not her first time being nominated, but I was really, really thrilled for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I did think it was kind of funny that she was like, you know, when I was at my height, I was told by producers that all I was worth was billions of dollars and no respect. And I know that she knows that that still makes her more privileged than other people on this planet, but I still thought it was kind of funny.
I still did hear in her speech what it means to be told you make things of artistic worth.
Absolutely. And also, it is really cool to see all these ladies who were undervalued in the past being treated legitimately. Because, you know, you had Pamela Anderson nominated last night. And, like, as gay men, we never had trouble taking these women seriously at the same time as celebrating them as figures of fantasy. So it does kind of annoy me when people are like, look at this, look how great we are that we're celebrating these people. It's like, actually, I was doing that for a long time and I was always made fun of for it. I was made fun of for taking Demi Moore seriously back in the day, for thinking G.I. Jane was a great movie. People talk about female-led action movies like the last, Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Davis. People are like, oh, this is like a forgotten classic. Well, to you, straight boy who only cared about your straight boy things, but I thought this movie was great and I was made fun of for it. So, and I literally remember being made fun of for it by people, and mostly by women, by the way. So, you know, on the one hand, I'm glad for this sort of thing happening. On the other hand, don't tell me about justice, because
not everybody was Bill's Golden Globe speech.
But I'm really thrilled for her. I thought it was a very, very well-deserved award, and I thought she looked great. And yeah.
She looked incredible. I mean, it's funny she's winning for the substance because she took the substance.
He totally took the substance. Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway,
Yeah,
we are here to talk about the Cannes Film Festival of yesteryear, going back, I can't count anymore, 60 years? Yeah.
yeah, 60, 61.
61 years. Greg, tell us about this festival.
Sure thing, Bill. This festival took place the week of May 9th to there were 2 weeks of May 9th to May 23rd of 1963. This is the 16th festival, and it is smack dab in the middle of multiple heights of national cinema. We've got we're at the peak of Italian art cinema. We've got the British New Wave and kitchen sink realism peaking. That will reach its apotheosis with the Palme d'Or winner a couple years later. I want to ask you, Bill, what is the difference between a leopard and a cheetah?
I do not know. It's probably, I'm sure that a zoologist will tell you about something about the difference in the mandible and in the coat.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting. To promote the movie The Leopard, cast and crew and press agents descended upon La Croisette, accompanied by a cheetah, not a leopard.
Is it because the coat is nicer? Is that why? Or are they just easier to tame?
Or just easier to procure? I mean, these are wild animals we're talking about. It's not like you can just call someone up and be like, I need this thing right away.
Yeah, and I don't want to go full PETA because I wasn't molested as a child, so I don't talk like those people, but I'm not a big fan of like wild jungle animals being treated like pets or like, and I will never film a movie with a chimpanzee. Like, I don't understand how people can do it. Those things just decide one day to rip your face off and they do it. Like, they terrify me.
It's the scariest part of Nope.
Yeah, wild animals terrify me. So you would never catch me walking a cheetah on the beach, or certainly going anywhere near somebody who was walking a cheetah on the beach.
So you're saying you would pass on being in a scene in Who's That Girl?
Oh yeah, I don't understand how they did it unless that animal was drugged the entire time.
Well, there's footage of this cheetah on the Croisette. You can go to the British Pâté site. The link is in the Wikipedia page for 1963. And
yes.
You can see it being walked by who looks like the press agent. And it's so weird. It's at this time in the early 60s, the Cannes Film Festival and La Croisette are basically Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
And you've got footage of wannabe viral stars of that day dressing up in Hawaiian garb, putting on a show for producers.
Yeah, because in that footage, you do see Claudia Cardinale with the cheetah.
Yep.
But you also see people... Okay. Yeah, that was her. Yeah. I read also that it was Brigitte Bardot. I don't know if that was a different festival. I don't know. Because I'm sure she had a lot of stunt photos taken throughout the 50s and 60s at Cannes. But you also, there's footage in that thing of like a woman asking a guy driving a car for an autograph, and I'm like, was that even somebody, or do you just assume everybody might be somebody when you're there during that week, and so you just ask everyone for an autograph who looks put together in some way?
He's a French singer, and I just
was he? Who was it?
The name escapes me. There was two French singers who were largely sought after, and it made me laugh that the one that you're talking about looks like Godard. Like these were sex symbols of their day. These balding, these balding intellectuals.
Yeah,
which means you and I have a chance.
Yeah. It takes more than just having a job to impress a potential lover these days. The 60s was a different time.
The early 60s is also seeing the gargantuan rise of television in pop culture, and one filmmaker, Marcel Pagnol, is quoted at this festival saying, "Cinema is dead, long live télévision." One of the films that was in the competition, Taki Papatakis' Les Abysses. Did I say his name right?
Well, his name is Nikos, so I don't know why you changed his first name. But
because I'm thinking of Glory Sky.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, Nico Papatakis. His movie Les Abysses, about the famous murder trial of the Papin sisters. It was widely criticized upon its release. I guess for its graphic violence. But
Well, and it was considered to be like an allegory for the Algerian War, which probably only made sense to French people at the time. I can't say that I know, like, I don't, my knowledge of culture, I guess, isn't nuanced enough to figure out where that is. And so that was also why it was controversial. We'll get to it when we get to
I
that
mean,
section, but yeah.
that's kind of like saying whatever happened to Baby Jane is about the situation in Indochina.
Sure. I mean, but for the person who interprets it that way and defends their argument correctly, it is.
Yeah, I follow you.
Like you wrote essays in university. It's all about defending your arguments and citing your sources. So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
But 1963 is a momentous turning of tides in global history. It's the year of the assassination of Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the year that the Cold War officially ends. We can put that one in quotations.
Mm-hmm.
The nuclear test ban treaty of 1963 takes place. The red telephone is established.
Yep.
In Canada, where we are recording from, we see the birth of the FLQ.
Mm-hmm. Which we talked about when we did Les Ordres.
Yeah, and are worth mentioning because the sentiments of French Canadian sovereignty are largely on display in the artistic efforts of the National Film Board at this time, and we have one of those movies in competition.
Correct, yeah.
Bill, won't you tell us about the other competitions?
Absolutely. As always, this is a much shorter section when we're in the older festivals because there aren't as many competitions outside of the affiche. Screening outside of competition, we have The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock. I think you saw the footage of Alfred and Tippy when they were still getting along. It's the most candid I've ever seen him, actually, where he's just like enjoying himself in the crowds, including footage of him releasing a lot of birds.
Pigeons. Bill,
Pigeons, yeah.
You go to a celebrity event where someone releases a cage of pigeons?
Yeah. Well, you know that's what doves are. Like when you release doves, it just looks lovelier because they're all white, but they're still gonna shit on everything.
Yeah,
I mean, they're birds.
I mean, we're talking about like a wide category of species of birds.
Yeah.
Doves are pretty expensive things that Mike Tyson spends all his money on.
Yeah.
Rock pigeons are sky rats.
Yeah. If we do have animal rights listeners, I think we've offended them multiple times today. Federico Fellini's probably biggest and most enduring hit film, 8.5, screened out of competition, mainly because the success of La Dolce Vita sort of made most film festivals feel like he should just be screened out of competition for the rest of his career, that he was such a giant, so easily recognized the world over that it was unfair to put him in competition with other filmmakers, especially in the 60s when he had a really good decade. We do have the International Critics Week. It's the second annual this year, and among the films that show are the groundbreaking Le Joli Mai by the experimental filmmaker Chris Marker, along with Pierre Lhomme.
Of the Rive Gauche.
That's right. And the Maysles brothers showed the movie Showman, which I haven't seen, although I have seen a lot of their films. And the Maysles brothers really were architects of the modern idea of documentaries. Mm-hmm. They were incredible artists.
Also, in International Critics Week is a movie by Hiroshi Teshigahara called Pitfall.
Oh.
And this is one of 3 movies of his that are based on novels by Kobo Abe, who wrote The Face of Another and Women of the Dunes.
Oh, okay. Is that movie in that trilogy box set that Criterion put out of his films? I've only seen Woman in the Dunes, and I love it. But
I love The Face of Another. I would have to double check that, but I just found it interesting. Like this guy is famous for adapting works of the most popular Japanese novelist of the
He also did that documentary on Antonio Gaudí, right? Which I also really liked.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, interesting filmmaker. At the Academy Awards for 1963, the Best Picture award went to Tom Jones, not the singer, the adaptation of the Henry Fielding novel by Tony Richardson, the late great, who was at the time married to Vanessa Redgrave. And
never seen it.
Her. It's very good. I actually took a course in my English degree on the formation of the novel, basically, novels of the 18th century. And I had a really wonderful old school professor. He was young and cute, but he was like a 3,000-year-old man trapped in a young man's body who thought that all film adaptations were sacrilege. And the only one that he gave credit to was this version of Tom Jones, because he said it gets the period right, and it, for the most part, pays ample tribute to the plot of the novel. It's like a 1,000-page novel. It's really, really large. It's a picaresque tale. And then Best Foreign Language Film went to 8.5 to Federico Fellini, his third of 4 times winning that category. He still holds the record.
For La Strada, La Dolce Vita, 8.5.
You're already wrong.
Oh, God.
La Strada, Le Notti di Cabiria, Nights of Cabiria, 8.5, and Amarcord.
Oh, cool.
The Italians did not submit La Dolce Vita for the Best Foreign Film. They submitted...
Pornography.
Yeah, that's right. They submitted Pontecorvo's Capo instead, which did get nominated. Partly the reason why the Dolce Vita did not come out in North American theaters until after the Italians made their decision about what to submit in the fall of 1960. So they did not know that it was going to become the biggest worldwide hit of all time. The Golden Lion in Venice went to Hands Over the City by Francesco Rosi, which is a really good, admirable, and kind of dry movie to sit through with Rod Steiger dubbed in Italian. It's one of those movies where everything's super realistic to the point that I find it a bit dull, although I think I like Rosie. I can't remember if I've seen anything else of his. I think The Moment of Truth is his. And then his son, I believe, is the documentary filmmaker who made Fire at Sea, which I really liked. And then The Golden Bear in Berlin went to 2 films, Bushido Samurai Saga by Tadashi Imai, and To Bed or Not to Bed, or Il Diavolo by Gianluigi Polidoro, neither of which I can say anything about because I have not seen them.
Ditto.
Greg, tell us about the jury.
Yes, I will. Our jury president is Armand Salacreux, who is a playwright. I looked up his plays. I don't know any of them. Do you?
I do not.
Our vice jury president, we don't have vice jury presidents anymore.
No.
But this one is notable classical Hollywood filmmaker Ruben Mamoulian, who got his start on stage running the first runs of... running the first runs. He did the first runs of Oklahoma, Carousel, and Porgy and Bess.
Yeah.
Produced them. But in film, we'd know him for Love Me Tonight and my favorite of his, Queen Christina.
Yeah, my guess is that they wanted him to do it and he was too old to really fulfill all the duties of the jury president. So they probably made him like an honorary vice so that he could, hold court without having to do the heavy lifting. That's my guess.
Have you seen Queen Christina?
Do you know, I just watched it for the first time a month ago.
How amazing is that last shot zooming in on her face on the ship?
Yeah, it's a movie that's most famous for like 2 incredible sequences, and it's that one, and it's also the one where she's just walking around the room thinking.
Yeah.
And because Greta Garbo's so charismatic, you can just watch her feeling while touching pieces of furniture because she's memorizing the room for future. It's a gloriously ornate film. It's one of those his quote unquote historical movies made in Hollywood in the 30s are all, you don't have to do any research to find out that they're all complete bullshit, but they're so incredibly enjoyable. And Garbo was such a star. Yeah.
Also in the jury, we have Jacqueline Audry, a filmmaker from France. She did the original adaptation of Colette's Gigi.
Okay.
She also did an adaptation of No Exit by Sartre. That interests me. I can't picture that ever being adapted. We have a French film producer named Wilfried Baumgartner. Looked up his works, didn't see anything I noticed. I don't know if you did. You went looking.
No, I never do research when you're assigned to the jury.
We've got another French film producer named François Chavin, who's mostly popular for genre films. The one that stuck out to me was The Man from London, based on the Georges Simenon novel.
Oh, okay.
For the second time on this pod, in the jury, we've got Jean de Baroncelli, a film critic for Le Monde. We just talked about him 2 episodes ago in The Cranes Are Flying.
Okay.
He's been at 3 festivals total, actually. And he was once on the organizing committee. We've got Robert Hossein, who is a filmmaker and actor. The most notable title I saw, he's in Rififi.
Did you see him in the footage from Cannes that we were sharing? He was very handsome.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he had like Claes Bang vibes.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, don't have to tell me twice. That man reeks of cigarettes, I can already tell.
Yeah.
Kashiko Kawakita is here in the jury. Really interesting person. Was a producer, distributor, translator. She brought, famously, Rashomon to Venice, where it won an award.
Oh, okay.
And she brought back to Japan 2 decades earlier Mädchen in uniform.
Oh, okay. Mädchen, yeah.
Yeah, how do you pronounce it?
Mädchen,
Mädchen.
yeah.
Uh,
Means girls.
I know, Bill. I've seen the movie. It's only girls.
Okay, all right.
Stephen Palos from the UK, another genre film producer. He made The Hands of Orlok, that movie about the guy who has hand transplants that are possessed by a criminal.
Yeah, great. I've
Yeah.
seen it. Did he produce the silent film one? Because that's the one I've seen.
No,
With
this
like,
is a 1961, I think.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. We've got Gianluigi Rondi from Italy. He's a critic who has notably served on juries for all 3 major festivals,
Okay.
3 times at Cannes. And then we've got Rostolav. The ink on this page is bad.
Rostislav.
Rostislav Urinev from the Soviet Union, a very prolific critic and historian. He's written many books about Soviet cinema, about Doshenko, about Eisenstein, even about Pudovkin, who wrote theories on montage.
Oh, interesting.
Like when I read about that, I wanted to go grab my old film criticism textbook and see if he's mentioned it all in the index.
And was he?
I haven't done that yet.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So you don't do the work, is what you're telling me, Greg.
No, I say I'm going to do the work. Can we find out if I will?
Yeah. For the listeners, in case you don't know, I'm joking. Greg actually does way more work than I do. All right.
On to you, Bill.
Moving on to the competition list. Winning the jury special prize is the Czech film The Cassandra Cat, also known as When the Cat Comes, by Vojtěch Jasný. He had been here before with the movie Tuha. We would be back here 2 more times. I get that this movie's probably good. I do not have a lot of patience for films of the Czech New Wave. I find them all, they're really smart and gimmicky in ways that are like one joke
Shtick.
Spread out over a 3-hour premise. I love Closely Watched Trains. I remember loving The Shop on Main Street. Those are, because there's like character and storytelling in those ones. I'm sorry that I sound so pretentious. But like movies like People Who Go Crazy Over Daisies or Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, like I don't know, my brain just goes to sleep and I find them a bit of a slog to sit through. And I found that was the case with this one.
No shocker, Milos Forman is the one who crossed over.
And yeah, I always forget about him. And this movie is about a village in, at the time, Czechoslovakia, where a magical troupe, like a magic, or a circus troupe or whatever, comes to town. And the girl in the troupe owns a cat who has the ability, once it looks at somebody, to turn them one of 3 colors that reveal if they are a cheater, a lover, or a liar. Is that what it is?
A bitch, a lover, a fighter, a mother. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And of course, the conservative mayor of the town wants to get rid of this cat. The allegory, my niece could write an essay on, which I'm sorry, that sounds like an insult. My niece is a very smart kid. I just mean that like a child could figure out what the allegory is being told here. In fact, to the point that I'm amazed that the movie even got past the censors. I think it did get into some kind of trouble, but anyway.
Yeah, it's if people must watch it, I recommend they turn the volume off and just enjoy it as the director's cut of the tunnel scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Basically. The jury special prize was actually awarded to 2 films. The other one was a masterpiece called Harakiri or Seppuku by Masaki Kobayashi. I think this movie is absolute perfection from beginning to end. It features my all-time number 1 movie boyfriend, Tatsuya Nakadai, who I think is beautiful beyond belief. It was remade later by Takashi Miike, and which also played at Cannes in the late 2000s. I actually like the remake as well, but I love this film. I love Japanese movies from this period. I think it's the golden age of Japanese and Italian film is the 60s for me. And this one is a perfect example of it. Every shot is incredible. It's a slow burn, but it builds to like this really emotionally devastating climax. And I love Kobayashi. Kwaidan will watch in the 65 festival, and I've seen like 3 different cuts of it, and I think they're all brilliant. And then he was also in the festival with Him to a Tired Man in '69, which I haven't seen. So I love that there's more of his films that I haven't seen, but I love this film.
Qui-Gon is a rare horror movie that was Oscar nominated
Yes, that's
for
right.
foreign language film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back and rewatch this one. I did the bad thing where I've done this to Antonioni as well, where I watched it on a day where I should have known I wanted to watch something stupid.
Right.
But it really grows on you in the second half. This guy is a master of tone.
Yes.
He starts stationary and still, and slowly things start to grow more, start to build more, and then finally you get to this sword fight standoff in this wild blowing grass. It's incredible.
Best Actor went to the late, great Richard Harris for This Sporting Life by Lindsay Anderson. I have been meaning to watch this movie for 1,000 years, and doing it for this show is when I finally got around to it.
Really?
Yeah, it took me a long time. It's been on the Criterion channel since I joined when I was a child, and I still hadn't gotten around to it. This is one of the most celebrated films of the British New Wave, of the angry young man kitchen sink movies of the early 60s. Lad. Yeah, that's right. It also earned Richard Harris his first Oscar nomination. It earned Rachel Roberts her only Oscar nomination in her career. As I was texting you, she had a really, really sad and troubled life. She was a wonderful Welsh actress who died by her own hand under very gruesome circumstances after years of suffering alcoholism and mental health issues. She's wonderful in this film. And this is a movie by Lindsay Anderson, our fabulous queer filmmaker from England, who later won the Palme d'Or for If.
I did not know he was queer.
He was, yeah. He was apparently madly in love with Malcolm McDowell as well, which I get. Malcolm McDowell was strangely sexy in his youth. Mm-hmm. Lindsay Anderson, I believe, had also won an Academy Award for a short film. And I really enjoyed this movie. It's about what is he in the beginning? He's like a coal miner, right? Because that's what...
Yeah, he's a miner and an aspiring professional rugby player.
Yeah, and he sort of like bullies his way onto a rugby team and becomes a star athlete and behaves badly in restaurants, which is one of my most cringy experiences to deal with. He's also screaming all the time, which I have like PTSD issues from having grown up with people yelling at me all the time. But all his success can't sort of work out his private relationship with his landlady, who he's in love with, who is a single mother and a widow. And it's just a really interesting character piece with a strangely melodramatic ending that doesn't ruin it for me.
I'm glad you mentioned the ending is melodramatic. It's what took the movie down a peg to just a 4-star experience for me.
Yeah.
I don't need her to brain hemorrhage to... It doesn't make it any more resonant for me.
Yeah.
And I have to say, thinking back to our Secrets and Lies episode where we talked about this stereotype of working class people not understanding how to behave in society.
Yeah.
I did think it was laid on rather thick that he puts his feet up on the chair when they go out
without a doubt
dining.
Yeah.
But
it's very like British version of method acting is what it felt like to me.
I agree with that assessment. But my goodness, if you just don't look at his face, that is a sexy man.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah. He's got the body to back up the rugby. Let me just say that.
And it's interesting, when he became old, he aged into like a wizened. When you look at him young, you think he's going to get burly in his old age, and he went the other way. He went the Mr. Furley route. Like, he looks like Father Time in his old age.
Is he the guy? Is he the opposite of Monica Vitti in that Red Desert?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, and he's also in. He was nominated a second time for the movie The Field by Jim Sheridan in 1990. Yeah, he was a wonderful Irish actor, I believe.
And father of Jared Harris.
That's right. Who has his similar look, who played King George on The Crown and has a similar look, like atypically handsome but compelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Best Actress went to a film that I really was upset that I could not find because I like Marco Ferreri, and it's The Conjugal Bed, or L'Ape Regina, which means the primate queen or the ape queen. No, the bee queen. Sorry, ape is a bee. Sorry to our Italian listeners. Marina Vladi is probably most famous for Godard's 2 or 3 Things I Know About Her. And she's also in The Cage this year as well. She's like the vision of the wife.
Yeah.
And so I really hoped to see this movie, also because it won Best Actress, so I wanted to see for that reason. Apparently, a movie that caused controversy at Cannes because there were whistles and jeers when it won this prize, and Marco Ferreri said, "It's not my fault if they gave it to me." He also did Dillinger is Dead, which I have seen, and he did Le Grand Bouffe in 1973, which was like one of the most controversial movies ever to play at the Cannes Film Festival, caused a big furor.
Oh, cool.
And The Story of Piera in 1983, in which Isabelle Huppert has sex with both of her parents, because that is how she rolls.
And that is French cinema in a
That
nutshell.
is French cinema in a nutshell. Best screenplay went to another film I could not source, which was Codine by Henri Colpi. The prize going to Yves Jamiac and Dumitru Karabat, as well as Henri Colpi. He won the Palme d'Or 2 years earlier. And moving on to the non-prize winners, we have a whole bunch. I really did my best to find some of these films. Some of them are on YouTube, but with not with official subtitles, with those auto-translate subtitles, which don't work. I need YouTube to understand that the artificial intelligence is not at that level yet. When a film is, particularly when it's old and the soundtrack is a bit rough, the auto-translate translates what it hears, not what is actually happening. When the first time I tried to watch the NFB film on YouTube, the auto-translate was giving us stuff about like the war in Palestine. Like it was translating things, because these people also in that movie, they speak with a really heavy accent as well. So it's like, I was like, oh no, I can't do this. So a few of them were like that. So we did not watch Alvorada by Hugo Niebeling, or Carambolages by Marcel Bluwal, A Cozy Cottage by Tamás Fejér. I found that the auto translate worked well enough on Robert Darène's The Cage, or La Cage. I got through it because also I was able to understand the French in that movie. I really enjoyed that film. I didn't think it was like amazing, but I really enjoyed it, and it's an interesting tale of a different attitude towards the effects of colonialism, which is that a doctor educated in France returns to his home country of
Gabon,
of course. My favorite ab-fab joke. Is he from Gabon? What? Is he from Gabon? And goes to a remote village to be their doctor, and has to deal with the fact that these people are all very isolated, and they think that all medicine is, witchcraft, and they're terrified to get inoculation shots. And there is a French colonial who has been living there for decades, who knows the people, knows the culture in a way that this transplant, who is genetically from there, does not. And he has a portrait of his wife, who then shows up, which I knew she was dead the whole time from the beginning. So I don't know if that was supposed to be a huge reveal that she turns out to be a ghost, but he falls in love with her. And, it's just about connections of culture versus birthplace versus all this stuff. And I didn't think it was like profound, but I thought it was very beautifully shot and atmospheric and interesting. It carried me along.
I was able to follow it enough with the bad auto translate. I don't know how I feel about it transitioning from a Graham Greene novel to a Daphne du Maurier novel.
Sure.
I don't know if the generic hybridity is pulled off all that well, and I find it a lot more interesting when it's a travelogue of sorts.
Yeah,
I love the dance scene where they're all just twirling scarves. But yeah, I'm with you. This was not boring, and it was very pretty.
Yeah, and that was The Cage. Hi, Frage.
Hi, Frage. That was La Cage.
Not La Cage au Fall. From China, we have Empress Wu by Li Han Hsiang, who we had watched his film The Enchanting Shadow for 1960. Mm-hmm. He still hasn't made anything that really hits deep for me, but is like a visual pleasure and not boring. This movie feels like bullet points of history, but I wasn't bored. It's just like it's like a TV soap opera, basically. And I don't buy its presentation of history as actually being historical, even though it is based on a real woman. She was actually one of the few sole empresses of China who basically clawed her way to the top, one assassination at a time. I also didn't find it that easy to follow what was happening in every scene, but I was blown away by the visuals of it, and to no one's surprise at this period of Chinese history that this movie has just this vague concept of promoting the idea that China's imperial past was all corruption and, ideological failure, basically.
Yeah, I liked this movie. Yeah, this is. You're right. It's a very loose adaptation of a passage from an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Just the dates. The rest of it is another version of Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah. Mostly to facilitate her performance because she's a big star and she's great.
Oh, she's outstanding.
Yeah.
She is. She's so good. I mean, she's basically the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably don't remember that Toronto used to do something called Caravan back in the day. I think it ended when I was a teenager, where you'd go to various parts of the city and various communities from cultures would put on, food booths and dance performances and you basically got like a white guy's idea of like being in the Philippines because you ate one dish and you saw one song being performed and it was lovely. We used to do it all the time. And that's what this movie reminded me of, like being at a caravan exhibit.
That's so Toronto.
Yeah. My friend was the Miss Greece for the Greek Pavilion one year. She won a pageant and got to be representing our community.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, I remember that was a fun night. We were up all night.
Sounds like a low pressure endeavor for her.
Yeah, it's on her resume for sure. The Italian entry, one of the Italian entries, is Ermanno Olmi's The Fiancés or I Fidanzati. I love Ermanno Olmi so much. This is not my favorite of his. I love Il Posto even more. He later wins a Palme d'Or for his masterpiece, The Tree of Wooden Clogs. I actually haven't seen The Profession of Arms. He just died, I think, a couple of years ago. The retrospective of his films at Cinematheque many years ago that I went to was titled The Sacrament of Simplicity, and I think that is a beautiful way to describe his films, that they are so compelling in this cinema verite way. You get to know these people and love them and care for them. They're mostly performed by non-professionals, and he just doesn't gild the lily at all in presenting particularly the life of the common people in Italy. And this film it's touching and also sexy. Like I felt for this couple and I felt their connection to each other.
This is a special movie. I really enjoyed this. A beautiful little quiet breath of a movie.
Yeah.
The plot is so simple. A couple's relationship is at risk when when one of them takes a job in Sicily, and while he's there, he's observing the customs and the life of this new home that is changing because of industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
And he realizes he misses his fiance, and that's it. And it's really beautiful.
And a lot of it takes place in the dance hall where they have their dates, where they go for dancing. I loved watching that all set up, where you see everyone come in and then the music starts. And then also an interesting reversal of the usual tale, which is that this is a movie about Northern Italians going south to work, which is not actually like the from what I understand, not the way things normally went. But yeah,
but he's going to, it's not Palermo, but it's some other.
He's going to Sicily.
Yeah. But like rural Southern Italians are also going there. So it's like...
Yeah. But for the most part, Sicilians usually left to go work in Milan or in Turin or because Northern Italy was where all the industry was happening. So there were jobs.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. The fidelity of the restoration is mind-blowing. Like, it is a crisp-looking movie.
Yeah. His movies were beautiful. From Canada, we have Pour la suite du monde, also known as For Those Who Will Follow, also known in English as Of Whales, Moon, and Men, which is how you'll find it on the NFB website, by Pierre Perrault and Michel Brault, who we just talked about for Les Ardres, which would come to the festival in 1975.
That's right.
This is, according to my deep research, the first feature film released by the National Film Board of Canada.
Wow.
It is set on a small island in the St. Lawrence River, where the community is asked by the filmmakers, in Brault's usual hybrid documentary fiction style, to resurrect their now dormant cultural tradition of hunting beluga whales, which in this film they entrap for the purposes of sending it to a SeaWorld, right? To a marina.
Yeah. A zoo or aquarium in New York City.
Right. And that's basically what we watch, but we get to know the people along the way. And these are filmmakers who have a very good idea of what is worth keeping in this
Yeah.
documentary. And for whatever situations that they orchestrate and set up, which I'm sure they do because I don't think that they were filming with many cameras. So the fact that we get things from more than one angle probably means that things were dramatized. You can't tell. I can't tell what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's described as ethnofiction.
Right.
So it is a documentary, but they're also doing some staging,
Yeah.
which is a flourish on the direct cinema tradition.
Yeah.
For people uninitiated in Canadian cinema history, the National Film Board at one moment in the 60s was like the center of the world for documentary and experimental animation.
Yeah.
In fact, John Grierson, who started the NFB, he was a Scotsman. He was the first filmmaker to coin the term documentary.
Interesting. I did not know that.
He did, yeah. He made war effort movies like Churchill's Island. He made a really beautiful movie before he came to Canada. He made a beautiful one called a short film called Night Mail, and it's just about the night postal service that runs from London to Scotland. And it has this voiceover poem by W.H. Auden. He
I
makes
did not know any of this. I've seen Churchill's Island. I did not know this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Grierson is so cool. I wish Canadian cinema. I wish there was still money in the NFB. I wish Canada took its arts as seriously as it used to.
Yeah.
And I loved this movie so much, especially thinking about it coming out at the same time as the October Crisis of Montreal,
Right.
or around that time. Like seeing this sort of seeing this sort of expression of sovereigntism that is elegiac, nostalgic for a way of life that is going away. And then I also find it morally challenging because we want these people to survive in this island community, but we also feel very upset watching this beluga get transported.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, our animal rights activist friends are going to be very happy with us.
Yeah. When I was watching the belugas, you know what it made me think of though? Those ugly engineer people from Prometheus.
That's right. Like big white worms. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Just like smooth in a problematic way.
Yeah. Well, especially for those of us who watched Blackfish as well, seeing a baby beluga being separated from its family was not comforting in any way.
I have not watched that yet. I can't.
It's pretty rough. It's a pretty hard experience.
Yeah.
Yes, and then I recently watched a film from the 30s for an article I'm writing on the Venice Film Festival of 1934, and it reminded me of Robert Flaherty films, and this is what this movie reminded me as well, which is there was in Robert Flaherty's day making his ethnographic films in the 1930s. They were just called. I mean, again, as you said, maybe the word documentary didn't exist, but they were treated as such. You know, the parameters around which we make these films now did not exist at the time. And Robert Flaherty making these fictional films about communities like his Nanook of the North, which is
Beautiful.
beautiful, but like all those people did not know any of the stuff that they were doing in that film. They were all living in modern lives, and they all had to be told about fishing and,
That's right.
polar bears and all this stuff.
It's the scene in Topsy Turvy where
Yes.
Gilbert makes the women in the obies, the kimonos, do the three little schoolgirls dance.
Yeah, even though that musical has nothing to do with actual Japanese culture. So anyway, that's also what this movie reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
From Greece, we have Uranos, which just means sky, but the English title is often called Glory Sky or Sky of Glory by Takis Ganelopoulos. I barely could stay awake for this film. I thought it was so boring. It is a movie celebrating the stamina of Greek soldiers dealing with first Italian invasion, followed by German invasion a year later. This is the Greece of my father's childhood. Although he wasn't on the battlefield because he was so young. But it's a movie that means really well. But in dedicating itself so hard to celebrating the spirit of devotion, sacrifice, survival, you just end up with all these men who are and women actually, because you see the women waiting back home in the villages as well. Everyone's just this vague stereotype. Nothing's personal in this movie. It just feels like a propaganda brochure. And so I found it really hard to stay awake.
Did you text your sister about this one? Being the
No.
war film buff?
No, because it wasn't a movie I would recommend to anyone to watch.
Yeah. It's a decidedly stoic movie.
Yeah.
People just stare off into space waiting for their untimely deaths. It's a kind of mode in war films I don't enjoy a lot. Like I'm on the island of people who don't like the Thin Red Line.
Okay. Yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't like it the second time I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm into gore porn. Like I don't watch it just for the battles either. But there's something about like holding a camera on someone's flat expression to evoke some kind of feeling
Yeah.
that doesn't work on me.
Yeah. But as you pointed out, it did have the cute young guy who played one of the sailors in Never on Sunday, whose name I can't remember. Who my mom probably knows extremely well. But yeah.
There were a lot of cuties in this one.
There are a lot. Listen, we are a nation of gorgeous men. Don't look at me now just because I look like I got run over by a train. All right. So listeners, hopefully my editing skills have taken me to a place where you cannot tell what Gregor and I have been through this morning. We have been recording this episode for about 6 hours, and many a failed attempt, many a power outage, a computer crash. But we are dedicated to bringing this one home, so it's going to happen.
Yeah, and just like Brady Corbet, we have designed an intermission into this podcast.
Yeah, I think it's Corbett, actually. I don't think it's French.
All right.
Yeah, I think. I don't know. All right, so we just finished talking about Glory Sky, and just to list off 6 more movies that are in the competition this year that we were not able to watch for this podcast, or we're not able to find. The Good Love by Francisco Reguero, Like Two Drops of Water by Fons Rademakers, who is a well-known Dutch filmmaker. El Otro Cristobal by Armand Gatti, which, as you know, is on YouTube. And I did want to watch it, but I couldn't work the subtitles. Rat Trap, Le Rat d'Amérique by Jean-Gabriel Albicoco. Tobacco by Nicolas Korobov. And The Venerable Ones by Manuel Antin. But what we did watch was How to Be Loved by Wojciech Has, a Polish film that I really enjoyed, as you know, because we've talked about it 3 times today. So let's see if we can keep our commentary fresh on this one.
They say I love won't pay the rent.
I like this movie. I think it is enacted in a very interesting melodramatic style, almost like a soap opera, but it is a film that I took very seriously at the same time. It's about a famous Polish actress in present day who is flying to Paris on a break, and she's reflecting back on the war years when she survived Nazi occupation and helped her boyfriend survive Nazi occupation by putting herself through all manner of indignities, including collaborationist projects, as well as being raped by soldiers. And then in the end, he's completely ungrateful to her because he had to suffer so much having to hide under her pillows. And I like the actress in this. It made me regret even more that we didn't get to see the Best Actress winner this year, because I think she would have been a candidate for it.
Her or Rachel Roberts.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see how it rates against the actual selection. And I thought it was an interesting movie about this age-old truism that no matter who's in charge, no matter what the ideology, no matter what boys are fighting over and their big ideas, women have to suffer either way. You know, she's screwed one way or the other.
And what's more Polish than that?
Yeah.
That joke felt a lot better when I told it in the second recording.
That's right.
I think this movie is beautiful during all of its wartime scenes. I like the deep focus photography. I love is his name Zbigniew Cybulski?
Yeah, I think Cybulski,
Poland's,
I think,
Poland's James Dean, that people would know best from Ashes and Diamonds. Where it doesn't work for me is when it comes back to the present and she's acting from an airplane chair with a lot of cognac and cigarettes.
A lot of cognac, so much cognac. Just being shoved in her face, yeah.
But an interesting movie all the same, and you could twist my arm to watch it again. Maybe I'll find some more merit to it.
Yeah. Like I said, I was surprised. This was a surprise for me because a lot of the A lot of the episodes we've been doing are cases where I've already seen the good stuff, and so everything I'm catching up on is a slog. And so it's really nice to find something that I enjoy that I hadn't already seen, and that I am coming across because of this show.
Well, and I find that happens more often with the older episodes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why some of them progressed into canon, and some of them were left behind as canon selections. So yeah.
Yeah.
Lord of the Flies by Peter Brook. This is a movie I had seen a few times before, and
really?
of course, yeah, and we had all studied the book in school. It's one of the first major novels that I remember studying, and one of the first times that I remember a teacher giving me the sort of explanation for literary devices and how to read and interpret literature. Basically, it's one of the first times I remember doing that in school with a novel, and it was this book. Not a book I particularly loved, even though I do admire it. And it's also taught in high school because that's the age at which the allegory seems profound and not quite as obvious. I think that it's being obvious is intentional. I don't think that that's a failing on the part of the author. And in making the book, Peter Brook, interestingly, there's no screenplay credited in this film. From what I understand, he basically directed it straight out of the novel, which is interesting.
Yes, with a lot of improvisation.
Yeah, which is effective. The kids are all great, and
Yeah.
where their performances falter is only in the scenes where it's obvious that they are dubbed in post, because it's shot very, very on a very low budget, and I'm sure that there was just no recording happening on the actual island. But it's a really interesting movie. It's filmed beautifully, and it's it's a story of our savage nature hiding beneath our veneer of civilization.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. This book and Animal Farm, they're those
Yeah.
two novels you read in grade 9 to learn allegory. They can be done really obviously, and this was not an obvious treatment. It's the choice to pick out of thousands, apparently, thousands of non actors, and to rehearse with them and then improvise and not work from a shooting script. I think it's produced interesting results. What we get is something that feels immediate and urgent and raw, and at times it's quite unnerving,
Yeah.
disturbing, and that's more than flattery I can give to a movie based on a book I don't particularly cherish.
Yeah. Peter Brook, of course, had been here with your favorite film, 7 Days and 7 Nights, aka Moderato Cantabile, in 1960.
That's right.
From Russia, we have Optimistic Tragedy by Samson Samsonov, which is another, Red Army propaganda film set during the Civil War, where a woman comes to lead. She comes onto a battleship of sailors who have announced themselves to be anarchists. She gets them into shape, shoots a guy point blank in the chest when he tries to have his way with her, which is amazing,
Yeah.
and then leads them into glory in battle. And I'm not surprised by anything thematically in this film, but I also found it really boring.
Yeah. There's about 12 too many patriotic songs. When it started, I thought, oh, cool, this is like Alien 3, but a war movie.
Right.
It's gorgeous because no one does montage better than the Soviets at this
Yep.
time of cinema's short life span. It just proves that the cranes are flying is the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah.
Like most of the propaganda you get is really blunt and obvious. Even Ballad of a Soldier has more depth and
Oh,
layers than
yeah.
this.
Plus, you have a whole battleship of all these sailors, and none of them are hot? Come on, people.
No, I was a few, like I could track load number 9, 10, and 11
All
amongst
right.
this cast.
All right.
Yeah.
Robert Mulligan's To Kill a Mockingbird played at the 1963 Cannes Film Festival, barely months after it won 3 Academy Awards for 1962. Mulligan is the brother of Richard Mulligan, who played Dr. Harry on Empty Nest, by the way. and would only appear at Cannes one more time. To Kill a Mockingbird is, of course, speaking of great literature, one of the most perfect books I've ever read. Certainly one of the most famous American novels ever written by Harper Lee. Her only book until her second was published posthumously, from what I understand, somewhat against her wishes. And this has always been seen as an example of a solid adaptation of great literature. I think it does great justice to the novel, but it also does not replicate the feeling of reading that book, because probably nothing can. But it does a good job of like getting it all up there and dramatizing it effectively and accurately as well.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say the thing it captures the best in the book is her ham costume when she goes out for Halloween is exactly as I pictured it when I read that book.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, as I was watching, I was thinking that should be my Halloween costume next year, because people who will get it will really get it.
Yeah, and it's the jewel in Gregory Peck's crown as well. He won his long overdue Academy Award for it, and it's a role that was always associated with him because in real life he also was like a much beloved, calm,
elder statesman.
Yeah, and liberal as well. So yeah.
And he's in that Oscar Wars book that we keep plugging on this podcast. He plays a pivotal role in the changing of the Academy structure into the 1970s.
Yeah, and for advocating for a lack of panic over having to change things. That he's the one telling everyone that the kids are all right.
Yeah, so I like Gregory Peck in the end.
Yeah, even though I still never thought of him as a particularly exciting actor. I think he's solid and he's handsome, but I've never found him particularly interesting. All right. And then speaking of the 1962 Oscars, we have another film from the previous year from Hollywood, which also won an Academy Award for its costumes, which is Bette Davis's final Oscar nomination, Robert Aldrich's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, one of the most famous classic Hollywood movies of all time, the beginning of the the beginning of the hagsploitation genre in Hollywood, and a sort of rebirth to Betty's career, and beautifully explored in Ryan Murphy's Feud series. I rewatched this movie just for fun for this show. Of course, we've all seen. I've actually only seen it about 3 or 4 times, but we all know it well. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's great, and I think it's interesting to watch it knowing that it's shot somewhat quickly on a very low budget, because you'll notice that the movie mostly takes place in the house and is shot in a way that looks like 1960s television, where you light everything for the most part evenly, because it allows for quicker camera setups and allows you to get through more pages in the day.
Yeah, I chose to not rewatch this one for the recording because it is the movie of this list I've seen the most.
Yeah.
Including in a lecture on Freud's monstrous feminine in the family melodrama. Yeah, it's fun. Fun used to be the word I would use for it. I used to take to it as a camp confection. The most recent time I watched it, it really struck me how nasty and mean it is. It's a very well constructed movie in that regard. Like it still pulls off what it's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked before about our community's propensity to turn all these established hags into camp figures in a way that diminishes what was achieved about these efforts in the time that they came out. And this movie is a very upsetting thriller. It's very ugly. It's very ugly and brusque. And even I'm writing a letter to daddy is eerie to me.
Yeah, and there would be suggestions of something involving that if the movie was made later on.
Yeah, I do like it. It's and I like Robert Aldrich. I like Vera Cruz as well. He works in very well in multiple modes, I find.
Yeah, because The Flight of the Phoenix is a good movie too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you think Joan was snubbed?
No, I think Joan probably made the mistake of placing herself in the leading category. I think if she had gone for a supporting nomination, she would have gotten it, but I think her ego wouldn't have allowed that. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. It is surprising how subtle she is in this movie. because Joan was as big a scene chewer as Betty Davis was, and she gives a much more naturalistic performance,
Hmm.
owing to what the character requires as well. I mean, I think Betty Davis is over the top because she's playing someone who is over the top. Um, but yeah, I don't think either of them were snubbed in particular. But in the fact that Betty didn't win.
No,
But yeah,
I'm not even positive retrospectively a nomination is warranted, but I'm certainly not mad about it.
yeah, same. Before we move on to our Palme d'Or winner, we want to talk about our worst in show, our Dand d'Or. And I meant to structure this a little bit better. I actually already talked about mine because Glory Sky was mine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, none of the films that we watched were outright choices for a turkey.
Hmm.
I didn't hate any of them, so I went with the one that I just found the hardest to get through, and the one where I checked the time signature the most and just found really boring, and it was that one. So it's a Dand by comparison. But
Right.
yours is one that we haven't talked about yet, which is Les Abysses by Nikos Papatakis, who was married to Anouk Aimée, actually. They had a daughter together named Manuela. And who, this is the only film of his I've ever seen, but apparently a lot of his films were in this mode of being sort of politically provocative. This movie was entered into the competition, as you mentioned earlier, and then was later banned for what were called its allegorical references to the Algerian War, which again, I just don't have the information to parse that.
Hmm.
I didn't rewatch it for this show. I watched it last year. I don't remember. It felt fresh enough in my mind that I didn't want to sit through it again. Also, the people objecting to it were really turned off by how unpleasant it is. There
Very
have been
unpleasant.
no end of movies and plays dealing with, inspired by, referencing the Papin case. And I find this one to be one of the most gruesome that I've seen. There's also, of course, Jean Genet's The Maids. There is the movie Sister My Sister. There is, what's his name's, Claude Chabrol's La Cérémonie. They all touch on this. This one seems to be also the most direct in dealing with that particular story. Then Minister of Culture André Malraux intervened, and the film was screened in the festival. It did play in competition. This led to the resignation of the president of the French Producers Union, Francis Gosnet, in
Oh,
protest,
wow.
and a scandal on the Croisette during its screening. So yeah, this movie had a lot of tongues wagging, which is interesting because I'd never even heard of it by the time I watched it, and I'd never heard of this filmmaker. So yes, as I said, it's about the real life sisters, the Papin sisters, who are played by real life sisters Francine and Colette Berger, who are who go unpaid, underfed by their old money, no money employers for so long that they end up murdering them. And it's interesting. It's shot kind of like experimental theater. There's a lot of like jerky body movements. Everything's lit by bare light bulbs, that contribute to a kind of harshness. I don't love this movie, but I enjoyed it and I appreciated its thornier qualities. So I'm interested to hear you tell me why it is your choice for the Dan Door.
Because I agree with you about how the Dand is not so obvious in this selection. I don't need to lay on thick why this is my selection. This is not as bad as we've ever had it. Like, nothing will ever be as bad as The Quiet Room. I found it tonally lacking variety.
Okay.
I found it very here's a word we use a lot on this podcast, very shrill,
Yeah.
and endlessly, and in a way that did not bring any interest to its topic. I found it contrived and blowhard. And I guess this is revealing a pet peeve I have about movies that touch on this topic, which is I really don't like movies about mental illness from any period. But it's especially trying to watch them from the past where like it's just go full Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
Like,
And everything's a gimmick. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like cuckoo cuckoo. Like you can almost see like the birds flying around their heads.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a drama class warm up. And the plotting is actually quite slight compared to the amount of running and screaming that's going around. I remember Mike chiming in from like upstairs saying, "What are you watching?" This is a classic case of hysteria. They just need to have an orgasm already.
Have you seen what's his name? Frank Perry's David and Lisa? Have you ever seen that movie?
Oh, that movie was very acclaimed when it came out.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know what you thought of that, because that is a very interesting, gentle take on people with mental illness, where there's no easy answers, and it's just done in a very delicate way about these just broken-hearted people who just need a break from the rat race.
And sometimes I love the tropes and I love the cliches. Like you and I never grow tired of using the reference to chicken bones under the bed.
Yep.
In this, it was just one note for about 75 minutes.
Yeah, which might be why I didn't want to watch it again, because I didn't want to. It is an assault on the senses.
Totally. Now, what he's doing with montage in this movie is very interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if he has other movies in his filmography that are good.
From what I understand, he didn't make a whole lot of movies, but yeah. But again, I'm not very familiar with his career, so I don't know. And that was Les Abysses.
Les Abysses.
Hi, Fridge. All right, let's move on to our Palme d'Or.
Yeah, let's do this.
Hello. Occasionally a role and a picture are so impressive that we behind the camera want to shout about it from the rooftops. I have just been privileged to work in such a picture. The film is The Leopard, from the celebrated bestseller, and it provides one of the most challenging roles it's ever been my good fortune to portray. The beautiful Claudia Cardinale and Alain Delon are also starred, under the masterful direction of Luchino Visconti. As you know,
I'm so excited to talk about this film. This
too.
is another one of those movies that for me is like a definitive Palme d'Or winner, you know, an intelligent epic. Is it an anti-epic is the question I have for you, in the fact that it's very long, it's ornate, it's beautiful, it's historical. It does have an element of romance, but it's not a lush romantic historical epic. It's not obsessed with making sure it doesn't simplify history to make sure you understand it all.
No.
And it doesn't put its romantic relationships, or its family relationships even, at the front and center of its sort of dramatic explication.
Yeah, you've got to do some work for this.
Yes. And that's what I appreciate about it. It's
Me
not
too.
my favorite movie. It's not even a movie that I find easy to sit through, but it is a movie I'm very grateful exists, and I admire it intensely. It's not even my favorite Visconti movie, to be honest.
No. Well, maybe it is my favorite, but it's the least emotionally affecting of the ones I've seen.
Yeah.
Like I take to the what's his fucking name? Basil Dearden. I take to his character in Death in Venice, or the leads in Ossessione, more than any of the characters in this one.
Dirk Bogarde.
Oh.
Basil Dearden was a director.
A victim.
Death in Venice is actually the only other time that Visconti played in competition, which I find interesting, that he was so rarely at Cannes. Probably a lot of it just had to do with timing of the releases of his movies. He also wasn't that prolific a filmmaker. He when you see the years that his filmography covers, there's not that many movies there, because he worked, quite intensely on all of his projects. So they gestated for long periods of time. The Leopard, and we should also mention there is a Netflix remake, or a new adaptation of the novel by oh my god, what's his name? Lampedusa. Coming to Netflix this spring. It might even be here by the time this episode drops. So in case anyone's wondering, we haven't watched it, so we're not going to talk about comparing it. I'm sure that it's a respectable adaptation of the novel that doesn't take the liberties that Visconti does, including the fact that he cuts out like a third of the book, because the book goes all the way up to 1910, because we actually go to the point where the prince, played by Burt Lancaster, or as he's referred to in the interviews by everybody, Lancaster, it goes up to his actual death. And Visconti made the decision to end the film with one of its 3 hours entirely spent at that ball, where Lancaster's character faces the inevitability of the future, and it's kind of like his soul dying. So we don't need to actually get to the point where everything he is lamenting actually comes true and he physically dies. Something that Michael Gebert wrote about this film that I found really interesting is that it's one of the few films to inspire copycats with more depth rather than less, which is usually the case with a film that starts a trend, such as The Godfather and The Deer Hunter. I think The Age of Innocence takes a lot from this film as well, because Scorsese would be a huge fan of this movie. And it's just incredible. Visconti was obsessed with everything being real. The flowers are all real. He had fresh flowers brought in every day on the set. There's no filming. From what I understand, there's no sets being built at Cinecittà. This is all filmed at real locations in Sicily for the most part. And then, of course, probably done up to the nines by his artistic team. And then, of course, lighting is everything. And we have cinematography that really makes everything look so vibrant and textured. And where this movie takes place, I feel, is a great big part of its layers. So I don't know. Again, I find this movie fascinating. I don't mind that it's a movie where I have to do a lot of reading to understand what's happening, because I don't know much about the Risorgimento.
Yeah.
And particularly about the specific time that this takes place in. I think you and I both watched the explanation of the Risorgimento by Millicent What's-Her-Name on the Criterion DVD.
Oh, that was great.
Yeah, because she basically puts it into bullet points, which is that the Roman Empire falls and Italy is split into various sections run for the most part by foreign powers. And one of them is the Bourbon kingdoms of Sicily, and then the Risorgimento starts in about 1815. It has three major movements to it, the third of which is the Garibaldi movement, which is what we are seeing happening on film, because it begins with his landing in Marsala and the plebiscite about whether or not the Bourbon kingdoms would join the House of Savoy, which is the northern.
Yeah, Garibaldi is a very celebrated figure today for his role in unifying the country. Although I think as the way it really plays out, he does all the work, so then a kingdom can take over.
Well, yes, and this is something she talks about, which is that the failure of the Risorgimento is that it's meant to take power out of the hands of these foreign principalities and give the power to the people. But what it does, and which we see in this film, is that it instead gives the power to a new money landowning aristocracy, which is the Don Calogero character. They're always pointing out the fact that he's rough, like he can afford everything. Everyone's kowtowing to him because he's richer than everybody. And his daughter laughs too loud, which is how we know she's new money trash, played in an irresistible performance by Claudia Cardinale.
Isn't that scene great?
It's so great, even though that's not her voice, so I assume that's not her laugh either. She's dubbed by an Italian actress.
And the way Concetta just runs off, terrified.
Yeah, but Concetta has been raised to believe that if she does anything to draw attention to herself in the least bit, she is failing the world. That's how women of that class in that era were raised to think. So that in the end, the common people lose out on whatever could have benefited the Risorgimento. And this is what the prince sees. He is a progressive liberal, or a progressive conservative, I should say. And he is a character who sees that there's no reason to panic. As his nephew, played by Alain Delon, at his most delicious.
Most tan.
Yeah, because Alain Delon, he was, of course, very good looking, but he did have like a sallow color to his skin, and he could look very leathery and lizardy. But you have a raging homosexual filming him in this movie who is out to make men. I'm so grateful that there is a gay director in this era, so that there's more than just the male gaze. There's also the gay male gaze, where men are lit and perfected to the same way that women are made to look like dolls, especially in old movies. Like all the soldiers that even with one line are all like fucking Bellamy models. Like they're all gorgeous.
Yeah, it's all the red shirts are fucking hot.
Yeah, and Alain Delon with the tan and the mustache is at his finest. Because he's not a favorite of mine, even though I know we're all supposed to think he's perfect. He's not somebody that I've ever found hot. He seems mean in a way that I don't find sexy. But he says to his uncle, things have to change in order to stay the same. And his uncle believes the same. But in the end, he realizes what has stayed the same is corruption and secret handshakes and injustice. So what was the point of any of this?
And it's cool to find out that Luchino himself was a count. He's from nobility. And so to make this movie, the novel apparently is from the perspective of the sheep, as it were. Like it's from the perspective of people who had something to lose in the changing of hands. But this movie is told from the perspective of those who, if either gained or whose fates went unchanged. They lost no fortunes. And that's fascinating.
He was an aristocrat who also called himself a communist, and I wonder...
Oh, a Godard situation.
I don't think he was quite that full of shit, but I also
Okay.
wonder how much he was honest with himself about the contradiction in that, or if people called him on it. That scene with the plebiscite is when the prince shows up, Don Calogero shoves that maid aside and lets Bert cut the line in this plebiscite that's meant to like be a democratic moment. And I wonder if Visconti is also pointing out the bullshit of his own beliefs or of the story he's telling. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. I've never read any like lengthy interviews with him or anything, so I don't know.
In another way of saying it, we're not sure where he situates himself in this world.
Right. Because for all that he called himself a communist, I don't get the impression that he lived a simple, colorless life, you know?
Oh no, he likes his nice wines.
Yeah, and his nice boys, too. So, I mean, he was with Helmut Berger for a long time, who was like the prettiest of the pretty boys. So, yeah. Bert is 50 years old when he shoots this movie. He's playing a character who's 45, which is hilarious to me. He's still in great shape. You see him shirtless. I wondered if he had the same clause in his contract that Kirk Douglas had, that he had to be seen shirtless at least once in his films.
Well, the guy used to be an acrobat. He's got stuff to show.
Well, and when you see him in The Swimmer a few years later, he's in fantastic shape. He spends that whole movie in a tiny pair of swimming trunks, and he looks great the whole time.
Where are you on Bert?
Not my thing. He has like a preacher dad energy to me. Those like that. Too many teeth. Cheesy smile. Too many teeth. But great body.
Is that your impression of him as an actor as well?
That is my impression of him as an actor. I'm sure as a person he was a lovely, lovely man.
Yeah.
I love the stories they tell about him and Visconti. The fact that Bert was a huge star, and getting a huge American star to be the lead in an Italian production is a big, big deal. It also helps ease the panic that they're having over the budget of this film, because of course it sunk Titanus Productions, and
That's right.
Goffredo Lombardo basically had to build it from scratch after this movie, because it did okay, but it didn't really do well enough to justify the cost. They said 3 million lira. I don't know what that would be at the time or now, because my internet searches confused me to try to figure that out. But he shows up, and Visconti is not nice to him because Visconti did not choose him. Visconti wanted
Brando.
He wanted Laurence Olivier. And he also wanted Nikolai Cherkasov, who some people might remember as playing Ivan the Terrible in the Eisenstein films.
Mm-hmm.
Lombardo cast Bert without asking Visconti, so Visconti was really mad about it and was really rude to him when Bert showed up. And Bert did not take it personally, and they ended up becoming friends for life. Visconti made the movie conversation piece after his stroke, I believe, and it was because Lancaster helped him complete it. And they became. And Lancaster always said that he based his performance on Visconti himself, because he said, what better example do I have of like a old money aristocrat than him? So that speaks really well to me of both men.
Yeah.
But they have this disastrous beginning that ends up, and the fact that Bert had a healthy ego, not a petty one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've always had a good feeling about him. I just would rather Kirk Douglas choked me, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I like Lancaster a lot. I mostly like his choices. Like, I like him more as a careerist than I think I do as a performer.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's an early pioneer of the independent film movement. He insisted on making movies outside the studio system and produced his own, Marty being the result, probably the most famous result of that.
And he does choices that agents would have told him would be the death of him. Like, he makes Sweet Smell of Success.
And the Rose Tattoo.
The Rose Tattoo.
Yeah.
Separate Tables, during that period when Hollywood is doing a lot of theater adaptations, dreary ones. And then he has late life successes like Atlantic City.
Yeah.
I just don't know if he has a performance I need to take to an island with me.
Correct. That's how I feel as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And his movies in the 40s, he does get shirtless a lot, and he really was impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also appreciate the daring of the structure of this movie. There is that part where Bert is talking with Don Ciccio, and they're interrupted by flashbacks to his fighting with his wife in the bedroom that then come back to the present. It doesn't necessarily need to be a flashback, but the fact that Visconti does that, I find it so daring. It's There's moments of the avant-garde in this movie that I find really, really, really interesting, and that I find really interesting to sort of unpack the layers of the more times I watch it.
Including that ball.
Well, the ball is incredible. I mean, it's incredible.
And it is a period piece conversing with the sick soul of Europe parties. Like it's this man walking around looking at everything losing its meaning, becoming superfluous as like in the very moment.
And calling the girls inbred monkeys.
Yeah, and then having a moment of a soft moment where he remembers his youth as he dances with Claudia Cardinale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cool that he is attracted to her and understands why his nephew would go for her over his own daughter. And that is such a wild thing to think about.
Yeah.
That he would
and his harridan of a wife will never get over it.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at her count those beads on her rosary. Her husband has just doomed her daughter into spinsterhood.
Lampedusa died before the novel was published, actually, so he didn't live to see the novel success, let alone the film's success. And that ballroom sequence, like I said, it's 50 odd minutes of a 3-hour film, shot from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. every day to take advantage of cooler weather because they're filming.
And they would have
in
to
Italy.
show up at 2.
Yes,
they have to show up at 2 for costume and makeup.
And apparently, a lot of the extras are like real aristocrats or fallen aristocrats in the 60s, people that knew Visconti. So, I mean, it must have been... and look, those rooms are huge. Like, it must have been really quite something to be on that set. It must have been really grueling, but it would have been something to see.
Yeah, the final result is something to truly drool over.
Yeah, and the women all look like flowers. Like, it's incredible. The costumes are by Piero Tosi, who... or Tosi, I'm sorry if I said that wrong, who was nominated for the film's only Oscar for Best Costume Design, which lost to Cleopatra, which makes more sense because it's a big studio film, and the costumes in that are glorious. And it doesn't help that this movie was probably just not seen by a lot of people in North America. But he had an impressive career. He started working with Visconti when he was like 20-something years old, 23. He went to the Garibaldini Museum of Palermo to research this movie. And it was his first Oscar nomination. He was nominated again for Death in Venice, Ludwig, which are both Visconti films, La Cage aux Folles in 79, and Zeffirelli's La Traviata in 82, and then won an honorary Oscar in 2014. I believe the first... He was the first. I think he's still the only costume designer to get an honorary career award, which was presented to him by Claudia Cardinale, his long-term friend and collaborator. So, and then I think he's passed away since then.
When you name those 5 movies he's nominated for, he really comes off like a man of the homosexuals.
I'm pretty sure you are correct. Yeah. And if he started working with Visconti at the age of 23, I have a feeling there were a few late nights and a few bottles of champagne. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
I don't say that gossiply. I hope it's true.
Yeah,
I hope all beautiful men have sex with dirty old men like me. Okay, go on.
I don't know what else I can say about this movie except that I really like it.
Like is the wrong word. I really admire it. I don't find this movie easy to sit through. And even though I've done the research now and I've done the reading, I still find it confusing, but in a way that I appreciate. I feel like it's forcing my brain to grow rather than... It doesn't feel obscure. And also, the money is on screen. Like, it looks incredible.
Yeah, it feels like I'm reading good nonfiction.
Yeah. It feels like it's good for you, and I appreciate the choice. I think that it's I think it's really great that they chose it for the Palm.
Yeah.
And again, for me, it does represent, and I've probably said this before, but like movies that to me represent Palme d'Or winners, which is like epics that aren't just there to spend money and make money, but are trying for something more.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to I wanted to watch Zama by Lucrezia Martel, because the talk about it was that it was this movie that works on the brain more than the heart.
Yeah.
And that's a quality I admire in this movie. It's a very cerebral exercise. I don't identify with any of the characters on screen. I don't particularly care about the romances displayed. I just enjoy the moving of chess pieces.
Yeah, I saw Zama at TIFF, and that is definitely true. I think Luc Martel is a genius. And I really, really admire that film. But it's another one where it's like, I didn't enjoy it, but I really admired it. And I didn't mind that it left me in the dark because she's so smart. And I also loved her because she introduced the film and said, I hope you enjoy it. But if you don't, I hope you enjoy a good nap. Just fall asleep until the end of the movie. And I thought, what a fucking amazing woman. Like, that's just incredible.
But that describes this movie. It's a very smart movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cannes was the world premiere of this film. It was released in Europe and the US later on, not received enthusiastically, according to Lombardo. It's a movie whose reputation has definitely gained in the years since. The US doesn't get the full 3-hour version until 1983. I don't know if your Criterion version had it, but there is a somewhat truncated, about half an hour shorter US dub in English that Sidney Pollack directed. With Bert speaking with his own voice, but it doesn't work.
I watched the documentary featurettes that all said that it's unanimously disliked. Yeah. So I thought, why would I put myself through that?
Which is also why it wasn't celebrated as much in the US. And then Lombardo also produced I Fidanzati. He produced the Olmi film as well. So he had 2 movies in the competition this year. So yeah, I feel the same. I don't know that other than the interesting trivia that I learned, I don't know that I have much else to say about this movie either, because I think it's great.
Yeah.
So Greg, if you were going to choose a movie from this year's competition to give the Palme d'Or to, which would it be?
Well, before I go contrarian, let me first just say I think that The Leopard is a worthy winner, and I'm happy with its place in the canon. But I had 2 choices, and I didn't know what I was going to pick until right now. And I'm going to go with Pour la suite du monde.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I love this movie. I lie awake at night with my eyes open, looking at the stucco ceiling, wondering how the fuck our only documentary winner of the Palme is Fahrenheit 9/11.
Oof, I mean, that is...
I think this movie is a gorgeous relic of direct cinema, and I love that it's from the NFB. I really loved it. And this is saying something about a movie that, by the way, I watched on public transit on my cell phone to and from work.
Oh, wow.
Like, I was really under a spell watching it. And I recommend it to anybody at all.
I also feel that The Leopard is a great choice. And so it's not deriding it in any way when I say that I actually would give it to Harakiri, because I think that is a 5-star movie that just works in every possible way, and it's just mind-blowing to me. And it's fine. It's fine that they didn't feel that way at the time. But I love Harakiri a lot.
I look forward to rewatching that one.
Greg, if you could give the Palme to any film of 1963, which would it be?
Yeah, well, special shout out to a short film that's not eligible because of its length, which is Scorpio Rising by Kenneth Anger.
Okay.
Very hot movie. The original music video. But I'm going to, of any motion picture, I would give it to one of the early postmodern westerns, HUD by Martin Ritt.
That's a good choice. I haven't watched that film in so long. I really need to rewatch it. I feel like Martin Ritt couldn't make a bad movie to save his life.
Never.
It was so great.
And
although
so
Barbara Streisand's chapter about dealing with him on Nuts is really quite eye-opening and yeah.
Should I watch Nuts?
Oh yeah, it's great. She's great.
Yeah.
He wasn't great as a person, and I believe at that point is already starting to reach senility.
Oh dear.
And so it's amazing how respectfully she talks about the people who really got in her way. Yeah, let's just put it that way. Yeah.
She's classier than people give her. She's not just a control freak, as people would stereotype her.
Yeah.
Yeah, HUD is gorgeously photographed. Who is the Japanese photographer of that one? I forgot his name.
James Wong Howe.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know they're not all the same. My apologies, listeners.
Yeah. Chinese, yeah.
I love Patricia Neal in this movie. I love the daring of this movie to make its hero into a piece of fucking shit.
Yeah. But you can't resist because he's fucking hot.
Yeah. It is such a good movie. So that's all I can say about it. Go ahead, Bill. What would your choice be?
Well, I was going to say James Wong Howe, he won one of his Oscars for HUD. and then retired by the early 70s, but came out of retirement for one last project because they fired the cinematographer of Funny Lady, which is the Funny Girl sequel, and he agreed to do it. He actually got an Oscar nomination for his cinematography on that. And Barbra Streisand loved, and adored him. They got along very, very well. And she's an obsessive gourmand of Chinese food. So they talked about that a lot, because one of the things James Wong Howe did when he retired was open a Chinese food restaurant.
And then he would spend every Christmas there.
Well, and apparently he had a photographer come to take photos of the place to promote it. And he was giving the photographer, who did not recognize him, tips about taking the pictures. And the photographer was like, listen, you just worry about the food, okay? I'll take the pictures. And he's talking to like one of the most venerated cinematographers in Hollywood history, which Babs got a kick out of when he told her that. So, yeah.
You circled back to Babs really quickly.
Oh, I could talk about Babs for days. But if I could give the palm to any film of the year of 1963, it would be a film that is in my top 10 of all time. The perfect combination of humor and suspense. A Hitchcock movie not made by Alfred Hitchcock. My favorite Audrey Hepburn movie, which is Stanley Donen's Charade, is a film that just gleams with perfection from beginning to end. I think I've already said that descriptor today. But a film I've never gotten sick of. I love it so much. It's a movie very deep in my heart. But I think it's also extraordinarily good. I think it's just beautifully pulled off. And all of its many different elements are blended together with perfection.
Is there anything more 1960s than that opening credit sequence?
Yes, without a doubt. But that's part of the thrill for me. I also love this period.
Me too.
I love this.
Henry Mancini.
Yeah, like the early 60s, the cocktail party 60s, not the Haight-Ashbury 60s.
Me too.
And
Givenchy.
Yeah. And just Audrey with such charisma and such sexy chemistry with Cary Grant, even though he's like 40 years older than her.
Yeah.
The rule doesn't apply to him because he's too hot for it to matter. And it's also, again, it's so funny. And the first time I watched it, the secret MacGuffin really did throw me for a loop. I did not guess it. So, yeah.
Are you up or down on the remake?
The Mark Wahlberg one?
Truth About Charlie?
Terrible. It's terrible, and partly because it doesn't have the humor.
Well, that's too bad.
That movie is so terrible that my best friend John, who will walk on his knees to find Mark Wahlberg in a foreign country if he had to, also was like, no, that movie's not good.
Oh, dear. I mean, I'm going to end up watching it because it's a director I will complete the filmography of.
Yeah, but it's a dark period for him. He does two classic remakes in that period that neither of them are particularly good, although the Manchurian Candidate remake is a lot better by the two. But the Truth About Charlie it's bad. And it's also a shame because Thandie Newton is a perfect choice for playing an Audrey Hepburn role.
She's had bad luck, hey? Like, she signs on to smart projects on paper and they don't pan out.
Yeah. Well, Greg, today was an ordeal. I am exhausted. We got to wrap this up fast because...
Yeah, we do. Because we're about to lose the power again.
Well, and because we've been doing this for like 4 hours, even though hopefully the end result is not quite that long. Hopefully we even have a file to share. But that doesn't change the fact that I love doing this with you. I still love doing this with you. And I thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks,
please tell our listeners what we're doing next time.
Yeah, this is exciting. We're going back to the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
As Fräulein Maria would say, a very great place to start.
Yep.
We're going to 1946, the year of the very first, the eventually very first Cannes Film Festival, because they thought it'd be a really good idea to start a film festival in 1939. That didn't pan out well.
No.
And it's an exciting year because we don't have the solo Palme d'Or or Grand Prix yet. We have multiple winners.
Yep.
Stay tuned for that.
Stay tuned for that. Thank you all for listening. Re-listen to our intro episode, by the way, if you want to know why the first film festival happened when it did, because I do not feel like repeating myself when we get around to it in our next episode. But thank you, as always, for joining us, and see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to Riviera Rats.
Our podcast is hosted and produced by Bill Antoniou and Gregory Roseborough.
Our music is by Joe Organ.
Our artwork is by Leo Kuvaris.
Follow us on Instagram at Riviera Rats.
Write to us at ratsriviera@gmail.com.
If you want to support our show, tell your friends about us.
Leave us a rating and a review on whatever podcast app you use.